Good morning. Happy Wednesday, everybody. As you can see, I'm in my outdoor office today on our side porch here at the parsonage. Hope your Wednesday's off to a good start. Mine is so far. Over the last several weeks on Wednesday mornings, most of those times I've been reflecting on various aspects of the second coming, the end times type stuff. First, it should be an article of faith that Jesus is returning, that Christ is returning to judge the living and the dead. That's in every creed. It's an article of faith. It should be, at least. I did spend a week talking about this event that gets talked about and about right much, called the rapture. And last week I began, we're talking about something that we find in Revelation 20 called the millennium, the 1,000-year reign of Christ, which plays in a lot into how people look at the end of time and how all of the events surrounding Jesus' return. So last week I began in looking at the millennium, this 1,000-year reign. In fact, let me read those verses to you. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding in his hand the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain. And he seized the dragon, that ancient serpent who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and threw him into the pit, and shut it and sealed it over him, so that he might not deceive the nations any longer, until the 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be released for a little while. And I just cut it off there so it wouldn't be reading too long. But in Revelation 20, there is referred to a 1,000-year reign of Christ on the earth with his saints. And so the question is, when is this? How does this play in? When is this in relation to the second coming? And last week I referred to a view of it called premillennialism, that the millennium, the 1,000-year reign, is after the return of Christ, or the return of Christ is before the 1,000 years. Jesus comes back before the 1,000 years. And for a lot of premillennialists, particularly now, that 1,000 years is a literal 1,000 years. So, and today I'm going to flip that. There is another view of the millennium called postmillennialism. Postmillennialism. Post meaning after. So So Jesus comes after the millennium. Jesus comes after this 1,000 years. So it is essentially the opposite viewpoint of our premillennial friends. And I'm going to try to explain this as best I can, because it is sort of the opposite take that we find in popular culture. So, for postmillennialists, the key is that the church age, or at least that last 1,000 years of it, are in fact the millennium. So if you are envisioning a timeline, we've got the church age, and then Jesus comes back. For our post-millennialist friends, the church age, or at least the last 1,000 years of it, are in fact the millennium, and after that Jesus returns and judge the living and the dead. We have the eternal kingdom, etc., etc. And the key is that this millennium, however you view it, takes place before Jesus comes back. Some of them take the 1,000 years to be fairly literal number. Others take it metaphorically, symbolically. It is expected during this 1,000 years that the gospel will be preached to the whole world. And Jesus refers to, in Matthew 24:14, that the gospel will reach the whole world before he returns. Postmillennialists take this seriously, and they envision the gospel reaching the whole world, probably not expecting that the whole world would be converted, but that the gospel would reach the whole world. For them, the church would eventually usher in an unprecedented period of peace and prosperity and tranquility in the world. So the church, in essence, for our postmillennialist friends, the church, in essence, brings in the kingdom. The church brings in the kingdom. And Christ comes after that. And Christ comes after the church has done its work. So our postmillennialists, this view of Revelation 20, this view of the end, was historically has been associated with some in the Reformed tradition, like Jonathan Edwards, the great American theologian of the 1700s, was a postmillennialist. Some of the great, Princeton scholars of the 1800s, late 1800s, like Charles Hodge, were postmillennialists. Postmillennialism is by far the most optimistic view of human history. Premillennialism, like we looked at last week, is a pretty pessimistic view of human history. Things get worse and worse until Christ comes back. Postmillennialism is sort of the opposite. It takes a pretty optimistic view of human history, or at least a very optimistic view of the role of the church in human history. And postmillennialism was also really popular in the late 1800s. That was an era of great optimism. It was right after the Second Great Awakening, when you had great movements for, as an era of great missionary movements from the United States around the world, era of the temperance movement and the women's suffrage movement. There were great strides being made in terms of workers' rights. It was a time of great progress and optimism about society, and so it would stand to reason that postmillennialism would have been popular in that era. So my own take on postmillennialism: first, I'm not a postmillennialist. That's not me. No offense to you if that is who you are. My own opinion is that this is probably a little bit too optimistic about the future. A lot of postmillennialists would view the church as paving the way for Christ's return. The church has to do its work before Jesus returns. And I might be wrong, but I just can't see Jesus dependent upon us to get things ready for him to return. Like Jesus is standing there looking at his watch. Okay, folks, let's get busy so I can come back. I don't think Jesus is dependent upon us for that. I also think that in light of the 20th century, 2 world wars, the Holocaust, where Hitler killed his millions, and then the Soviet Union under Stalin, where even more millions were killed, and Pol Pot with his millions. In light of the 20th century and the Holocaust of it, I think that makes it hard for me to envision a period of such great peace and tranquility and prosperity in the world before Christ returns. That is, I guess, my take on postmillennialism. Again, this comes from Revelation chapter 20, and next week I will, or when I come back, next time from here, I'll be referring to one last view of the millennium, the one which I guess I would put myself into. Next week I will not be here. I'll be at Salkehatchie down in Manning, South Carolina, sweating. And I just may show up with some Gatorade at some point during the week next week. So y'all have a great day. And if you have any particular questions about the book of Revelation or things pertaining to the end, stick them in the comments there. Y'all have a great day.